Tonight, we're going to talk about basic stingers and wasps and their potential role within Battletech Alpha Strike. Now, I personally love these mechs because they are very iconic. They show up a lot in novels and lore. They're pretty ubiquitous across most Interspheres factions, and you can get them in a lot of box sets. They're really iconic. I think they look cool, both in metal and in plastic. And they've been with the franchise for a really long time. As we start a review of these, though, we need to keep in mind that they are not the most optimized mechs for playing Alpha Strike, but they do have a role and can fill a couple of different roles as long as you know what they're doing and you play them to that angle. These are not mechs that are going to go stand up and fight and bully other mechs around. They're not going to be mechs that can jump on an objective and hold it for very long. So you really need to keep that in mind if you decide to play them, and they need to fit into your list and have that specific role. So to start a review, I'm going to review the best, I think, of the vanilla stingers and wasps. Now, why am I saying vanilla stingers and wasps? Because there's lots of different options out there for stingers and wasps, and some of them can be very good. I mean, you look at the stats and they're very obviously very good, and some of them can bring a lot more to the table than what just your basic models or basic variants and chassis can do. So of the basic stingers and wasps, the vanilla stingers and wasps, I think the best version of it is the Stinger STG 3G. The reason that I think it's the best is because for the same number of points as the STG 3R or the Wasp WSP 1A, it brings energy weapons. Whereas those other two variants, which are basically identical stats to the 3G for the same points, do not bring energy weapons. So if you're only going to bring one of them in your list, make it the 3G Stinger. The other two, the 3R Stinger and the 1A Wasp, they have the same stats. They just aren't bringing energy weapons to the game. And that energy weapon ability is going to get you a little bit of crit resistance, which you probably, honestly probably won't need because the hit points on these are so low, but it could come up. There could be a situation where you take a weapons hit on one of these and you still have 1 or 2 hit points left, and it's, cooks off your ammo and thus cooks off your mech. And so at least you're for free, you're getting some crit resistance. So the point value on these is 14 points. Their movement is 12 with a jump. That means their TMM is 2. Their damage output is 110 with no overheat, 2 armor, 2 structure. Again, energy weapons and jump are is the basic abilities on the 3G. If you're looking at the 3R or the Wasp 1A, you're not getting those energy weapons. Now, the pros that I see when I run one of these is that they're cheap. They're only 14 points to get a battle mech on the board. They also have that jump ability, so even though the TMM is low, which makes them very vulnerable at only having 4 total hit points, you can jump and get that TMM up to 3. And that can deter someone from wanting to shoot at this mech. And so normally, if they were only a 2, someone might say, well, that's a cheap, easy shot, and I can just take a mech right off the board because it doesn't have a lot of hit points. But when they start looking at it being a TMM of 3, I've noticed that a lot of opponents start reconsidering that. They also don't see it quite as threatening because of its low hit points and because of its low damage output. Now, the cons to this, again, is that TMM of 2. If you're not jumping, your TMM is only 2, and you are very vulnerable to being 1 or 2 shotted off the board, right? And that goes into the other con is its health points are very low. And because you need to be jumping, it means your skill level, which is a base 4, is actually going to be a base 6, which means your shooting isn't going to be very good. So you might be asking, why would I run this if I have to be jumping to survive, and if I don't have good damage output and I don't have good armor structure? The role that I have used these mechs in over the last year or so, especially in my most recent pirate list, is in the role of a spotter for indirect fire units. And what I like about taking these units as a spotter is, unlike vehicles or infantry that are being used as spotters, they are taller, so they can see over level 1 hills usually. So you don't have the problem of having to move up on top of a hill. Also, a lot of times you have a little more mobility than you're going to find with some other vehicles, or infantry, especially infantry. You'll have more mobility than some other vehicles. And because you're jumping around and you have a low damage output, you really don't want to be doing anything else, right? You don't have another role. So you can dedicate this unit to spotting and have him be one of your sole spotters on the board. And because of his stats and what he is and what he's doing, oftentimes your opponent doesn't really want to waste time and energy taking long range shots at a jumping spotter with a TMM of 3. So he'll fit into that role. You can even skill them down to say 5 or 6 and save a couple more points. You can get that down to 13 or even 12. And that can really, for 12 points or 13 points or even 14, you can have a really good spotter who can see over level 1 hills or who can get up on top of buildings and be able to see a good portion of the battlefield, and who's not going to necessarily draw a ton of attention to themselves. Or if they do, you have a TMM that's pretty high, you're at range, someone wants to take your spotter out so that your LRMs can't see, then they're not shooting at other things in your army. The other thing that I found very useful for them, because they got that one shot and it's a really cheap one shot, is as a crit seeker. So you have something big and heavy, you shoot with them first. You always shoot with them first so they can strip armor off, and then you just plink a crit, right? So you have a couple of one-shotter guys out there, or just one. The stingers out there, you can plink those hits. They can also be a low-key, sneaky objective grabber. So for 14 points and they jump, you can either be moving 12 every turn, or instead of jumping, you can run and use ground movement. And next thing you know, you're moving, what is that, 18 inches, and you can get on objectives. And that jump ability can help you secure those objectives. It can help you get over things that you might not normally be able to get over. It can help you get around things. And then his speed, if he runs, is even better. So he can be a sneaky objective grabber that people just don't pay attention to. And he can also be a bit of a distraction. If he is dropping indirect fire, someone might say, man, I cannot be dealing with this stinger or wasp way in the backfield dropping these LRMs from a heavy LRM carrier on me. I'm going to take some shots at him. Well, if they're a base of 4 for their skill, the range is long, so that makes it an 8. And this guy's jumping. They need 11s to hit him. They're probably not going to one-shot him or two-shot him or even three-shot him. And they're dedicating a lot of fire to take out this fairly cheap unit. So he does a really good job in that role as a spotter, and then secondary as a crit seeker, and then as a sneaky objective grabber. He can also help with kind of protecting your backfield. If you have indirect fire units that are hiding, he can kind of act as a bodyguard unit, although not super effectively, because his damage output is so low. The way I would use them is if someone misplays, say one of their a light hover or something like that, maybe you can charge that thing in the rear, or get a rear shot on it, and that would be how I would play that. But he's not the most fantastic bodyguard in the world, but you could look at him that way. Now, I know I did mention the other 2 units that are basically identical stats to this, the 3R and the Wasp 1A. The other most notable Wasp is going to be the Wasp 1S. It is identical stats, except it does pick up energy weapons, and it does have a short range attack of 2. It is also 15 points. It is I think it's a pretty good Wasp because it picks up those two shots and the energy at short range, for only an extra point for 15. That's not really that bad of a deal. The only problem is that it is limited really to Lyrans, Fed Sons, and Mercenaries. Now, the other thing I want to point out is that you could compare taking 2 Stingers to, say, taking 1 Phoenix Hawk 1. Now, the stats are identical. So if you add the 2 Stingers together, they both have, and you compare it to a Phoenix Hawk, they're both 4 armor, 4 structure. They both have a TMM of 2. They both have a jump of 12. They both have 2 short and 2 medium. Now, the Phoenix Hawk is going to be 2 points cheaper, but if you took 2 Stingers or a Stinger and a Wasp, what you're going to pick up is additional activations. So you could use 2 Stingers. If you had 2 Stingers, you could use one as a initiative sync, overtaking, say, a Phoenix Hawk. And I know Phoenix Hawks are very popular and they're very good. The other thing you pick up is a little is a little more maneuverability for objective grabbing and board control as well, because you'll have more units on the board. So that is something to consider if you're going to take a Phoenix Hawk 1 or 1D, is that maybe you look at taking a Stinger and a Wasp, or two Stingers, because the stats are fairly comparable, and it's only costing you 2 extra points to have 2 bodies on the board. All right, that's all I've got for tonight. If you have ran Stingers or Wasps in the past, let me know how they've gone, how it's worked for you, what you've liked and not liked about them, what's worked well, what challenges you face. Put it in the comments below, and let the broader community know. May the blessings of Blake be upon you.